What really messes with your head is realizing just how good someone can be at pretending. I'm not talking about little white lies or hiding a surprise gift. I mean full-on, Oscar-worthy acting every single day, right in front of your face. My wife, let's call her Lisa, was quite literally a performer. She did theater, local indie films, even taught acting workshops on weekends. I used to be so proud of her passion. It made our life feel full of color, like we were always part of something creative. I loved watching her on stage, that spark she had, the confidence, the way she drew people in. I honestly believed I had the coolest wife ever. We'd been married for 5 years, dated for 2 before that. At first, it was one of those whirlwind kind of relationships where everything feels like a movie. We were inseparable. She made me feel like the most important person in the world. Always texting me sweet things, surprising me with tickets to shows, cooking these wild meals from scratch even if they turn out weird. I felt seen, loved, and like I'd won the relationship lottery. But over the last year or so, things changed. At first it was subtle. She was tired more often, stopped inviting me to her performances, said she wanted to keep personal and professional separate. Okay, fair enough. I wanted to respect her space. Then it turned into more canceled plans, more late rehearsals, more weekends where she was just gone. She'd say she was teaching a weekend retreat, or helping a friend with an audition, or even just clearing her head at a cabin with no signal. Always a story. And her stories were good, detailed, believable, even emotional. I had no reason not to believe her until I started realizing I wanted to believe her, because the alternative scared me more than anything. Still, the signs were there. She stopped being affectionate unless someone was watching. At home, she was distracted, almost distant. But the second we were at a party or around friends, she'd turn it on, holding my hand, smiling at me like everything was perfect, and I'd smile back, even though deep down I felt like I was becoming a side character in my own relationship. I remember one night, she came home really late, makeup smudged, heels in her hand, that tired but happy kind of look people get after a night out. I asked how the show went, and she said it was fine, but her voice didn't match her face. There was a sparkle there. Not like she just performed, but like she'd been with someone who made her feel alive. It was the first time I seriously thought something might be going on. But then she hugged me, made a joke about how I was becoming such a worrier, and I let it go. Again, that's what really got to me later. How many chances I gave her, how many red flags I ignored because I loved her so much. I didn't want to be the suspicious husband. I didn't want to admit to myself that someone who once swore they'd never hurt me could look me in the eye every day and do exactly that. Looking back, I don't think she ever stopped performing. I just stopped being part of the act. The night everything started to unravel wasn't even dramatic. No big fight, no shouting match. It was one of those quiet evenings where things feel too normal, like calm before a storm you didn't know was coming. Lisa had left her laptop open on the kitchen table. That by itself wasn't strange. What caught my attention was that it kept pinging, not loudly, just the soft sound of incoming messages. Normally, I wouldn't even look, but she was in the shower, and curiosity got the better of me. I glanced at the screen. At first, it looked like a group chat. Then I saw the name at the top, Eli Workshop. I didn't recognize the name, which was weird since Lisa always talked about the people she worked with. But what really made my stomach drop was the preview of the last message. Just 6 words. Wish I was waking up there. That was enough to make my hands start shaking. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. Then I opened the chat. It wasn't a one-time message. It was a thread, pages of text that made my chest feel like it was caving in. Photos, inside jokes, nicknames I'd never heard her use, details about private trips I thought she took alone, comments about her body, about things they'd done, about how he missed her scent. That one stuck with me for some reason. It felt way too real. They'd been talking for at least 4 months, probably longer, and they were careful. Most of the flirty stuff was buried between casual conversation, like they knew how to hide in plain sight. Honestly, if I hadn't opened it at just the right time, I never would have seen any of it. I closed the laptop, like it had burned me. I just sat there for a while, trying to breathe, trying to keep my mind from spinning. Every late night, every canceled plan, every time she brushed me off or turned her phone face down on the table, it all lined up in the sudden, awful way. I didn't say anything that night. She came out of the shower, kissed me on the head, and asked what I wanted to eat. I told her I wasn't hungry. She didn't even ask why. That silence, that total normalcy, was the hardest part. I was sitting there, crushed, while she acted like everything was fine, like we weren't living in two completely different realities. I didn't sleep at all, just laid there next to her, watching the shadows move across the ceiling, and wondering how much of my life had been a lie. I kept hearing that guy's message in my head. Wish I was waking up there. And the worst part? He probably had. Maybe not that morning, but at some point, while I was working late or trusting her like an idiot, he'd been here, in my house, in our bed, and I hadn't seen it coming. That night marked the end of whatever trust one had left. I didn't confront her right away, not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to be smart. I needed to be sure. I needed to figure out what I was going to do about it. But make no mistake, the mask was slipping. And once you see behind it, you can't unsee it. It took me 3 days to build up the nerve to say something. 3 days of pretending everything was fine, smiling when I needed to, nodding when she talked about her day. I felt like a ghost walking around my own life. The hardest part wasn't keeping the secret. It was watching her act like nothing was wrong. She'd kiss me goodbye in the morning, send the occasional check-in text, even asked if I wanted to go see one of her shows that weekend. That part made my skin crawl. She was still playing the role, and I was still the audience. But I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't insecure or paranoid or reading into things. I knew, and once I had that kind of clarity, something inside me clicked, not in a dramatic way, not anger, not even sadness yet, just this quiet resolve that I was done being played. So one evening, I asked her to sit down, told her we needed to talk. The second those words left my mouth, her whole vibe changed. She tensed up, like she knew what was coming but was trying to figure out which mask to wear. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just said I knew about Eli. I told her I saw the messages, the photos, everything. I said I didn't go snooping. It just happened. Her face didn't change for a few seconds. Then she tried to laugh it off. Said I was overreacting, that I must have misread something. When I told her exactly what I saw, she went quiet. Then came the shift, not to remorse, not to guilt, but to defensiveness. She said things like it wasn't serious, and I didn't think you'd find out like this, and it just kind of happened. That line, it just kind of happened, it hit me like a truck, like she had no idea how much damage she'd done. Like this whole thing was some minor detour in an otherwise acceptable marriage. I asked her how long it had been going on. She said 4 months. I asked if it ever happened in our home. She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She said she was confused, that I'd been distant, that I was emotionally unavailable for a while. It was like watching someone try out different scripts to see which one would land best. None of them did. I didn't cry. Not yet. I think I was too numb. I just sat there listening, watching her go from regretful to defensive to frustrated, like she was the one being wronged, like my hurt feelings were getting in the way of her explanation. And still, even in that moment, part of me hoped she'd come clean, just be honest for once. But everything she said felt rehearsed, and I realized then I wasn't talking to my wife. I was talking to a character she created, a version of herself that could do no wrong. Eventually, she stopped talking and just looked at me, waiting for me to respond. But I didn't have much to say. What do you even say to someone who's been lying to your face for months, maybe longer? I just got up, said I needed space, and left the house. I drove around for an hour with no destination, no music, just silence. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel everything. The betrayal, the anger, the heartbreak. All of it. This was no longer just a bad chapter in a good relationship. This was the moment the whole book fell apart. After I left the house, I didn't go to a friend's or a hotel. I ended up parking in a grocery store lot, sitting there in the dark with the engine running. just staring at nothing. I think my mind needed somewhere quiet to fall apart. I always thought that if I ever got cheated on, I'd react with rage, maybe break something, yell, demand answers. But instead, I felt hollow, like someone had turned the volume down on my entire life. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt real anymore. The part that hurt the most wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was a realization that while I was trying to build something real with her, a home, a future, maybe even kids someday, she was living a double life, like we were playing two different games, and I was the only one following the rules. I kept going back over little moments in my head, overanalyzing everything. That trip she took last fall where she needed alone time. That one birthday where she was suddenly sick the day of. All the evenings she'd come home and look through me, not at me. I'd chalked it all up to stress, to burnout, to being in a long-term relationship where things naturally get a little quiet. But now I knew better. It wasn't distance. It was deception. When I finally made it home, it was almost midnight. The house was dark. She hadn't texted or called. No, are you okay? Not even a where are you? Just silence. And honestly, that silence told me more than any explanation ever could. She didn't come to check on me. She didn't fight for me. She just went to bed. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because she asked me to. She didn't say a word when I came in. But because the thought of lying next to her, under the same blanket, breathing the same air, I couldn't do it. Not after knowing what I knew. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I told my boss I had a family emergency, which wasn't exactly a lie, just not one I was ready to explain yet. I spent the day walking around the neighborhood, getting coffee I didn't drink, watching people live their normal lives like mine hadn't just split in two. I didn't talk to anyone. Not yet. I didn't even tell my closest friend. I felt embarrassed. Like I'd failed. I know that's not how it works. But when you get cheated on, you can't help but question your worth. Was I boring? Was I too focused on work? Did I stop being attractive to her? Did she ever really love me? I felt like I was falling down a staircase with no end. Every thought led to another, and none of them brought me peace. That evening, she acted like nothing had happened. She asked if I wanted dinner. I couldn't even look at her, not out of hate, but because looking at her felt like staring into the sun. Too much pain in one place. I told her I needed a few days. She didn't argue. She just nodded. That was it. No apology. No questions. Just a nod. And that's when it hit me. I was the only one hurting here. She'd already made peace with what she did. She wasn't wrestling with guilt. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She'd already left the relationship long, before I knew there was something to leave. That realization broke me. Not loudly, not all at once, but in the quietest, most brutal way possible. There's this weird thing that happens when you're sitting in the ruins of something you thought was solid. You start to wonder if any of it was ever real. Every memory, every anniversary, every inside joke, it all starts to feel tainted. Like someone came along and smeared dirt across the best parts of your life. That's where I was. For the first few days after the confrontation, I felt stuck between two worlds. One part of me still wanted to believe this could be fixed, that maybe this was some horrible mistake, or a phase, or something we could talk through with enough honesty. The other part of me knew better. I kept thinking back to her face when I told her I knew, not scared, not devastated, just caught, like someone who got pulled off stage mid-performance. And when the show ended, so did the effort. I spent most of my time away from home. I stayed with my brother for a few nights. I didn't tell him everything, just said we were having some issues. He didn't pry, which I appreciated. I think he could tell I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. At night, I'd lay awake replaying everything. The early years when we couldn't get enough of each other. The road trips. That one random Tuesday where she danced in the kitchen in her pajamas while I made pancakes. Moments that used to feel like home now felt like someone else's story. And the most painful part was realizing I still miss her, even after everything. Because when you love someone that deeply, it doesn't just shut off like a light switch. But little by little, I started to feel something else creeping in, clarity. Not peace, not yet. but a kind of mental sharpness that comes from finally facing the truth head on. I realized that I hadn't really seen her for who she was in a long time. I'd been in love with a version of her she wanted me to see, and the longer I stayed in that illusion, the more I lost pieces of myself. I started writing things down, not to share, not yet, just to get them out of my head. I made a list of every time I felt small in our relationship, every moment she dismissed my feelings, every time I talked myself out of confronting something, because I didn't want to start a fight. And man, that list got long. That's when I knew this wasn't about one mistake. It was a pattern, a long-running one. I also began asking myself some hard questions. Could I ever trust her again? Would I ever be able to look at her without seeing him? And if I stayed, would I be doing for love or out of fear of starting over? The answers weren't comforting, but they were honest. I still hadn't told anyone the full story. Not my family, not my closest friends. I think part of me was afraid of saying it out loud, because once I did, it became real in a way that couldn't be taken back. But deep down, I knew the path I was on. I wasn't ready to make a final decision yet, but I knew this. I couldn't live in a story that wasn't mine anymore. I couldn't keep pretending just to maintain an image of a marriage that no longer existed. And I think, for the first time in a long time, I started to feel just a little bit free. I thought the worst part was over. I thought finding out about the affair, confronting her, and dealing with the emotional wreckage would be the peak of it. That after that, it was just about deciding whether to stay or go. But no, that was just the surface. One afternoon, while she was out running errands, I was at the house gathering some of my things. I hadn't fully moved out yet, but we were giving each other space, and I figured it was a good time to grab some clothes and personal stuff while she wasn't around. That's when I noticed her tablet sitting on the counter, screen still on, just like the laptop before. And I know it sounds bad, like I was snooping again, but at that point I had every reason not to trust her. So, yeah, I looked, and this time it wasn't messages that got me. It was her email. There were multiple receipts, travel, hotel bookings, rideshare charges, all linked to places she never told me she'd been. The dates lined up exactly with the times she'd told me she was away for workshops or personal wellness weekends. But that wasn't even the wildest part. Buried in one email thread, I found something that made my heart stop. It was a conversation with someone I didn't recognize, thanking her for helping with a short film project. The language was familiar, too familiar. I copied the name and searched online, and there it was, a full-on independent film, posted on a public video platform. The credits listed her not only as an actress, but as a producer. This wasn't a side project. This was something she'd been deeply involved in for months. Not once had she mentioned this to me. I clicked through her profile on the film site. That's when I saw it. Photos, posts, clips from other projects, stuff she never told me about, with people I'd never heard of. And there was Eli, right there in the behind-the-scenes photos, arm around her waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. This wasn't just an affair. This was a second life. While I was at work, paying bills, planning for the future, she was building a completely different identity, one where I didn't exist. She had friends I never met, events she never told me about, experiences she shared with someone else. And the thing that really got to me, she looked happy, genuinely. That same glow she used to have around me was now in those pictures with him. Not the forced smile I'd been getting at home. This wasn't just emotional cheating. It was full-on abandonment. She just hadn't bothered to move her stuff out yet. It hit me like a wave. All that time I spent trying to fix things, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong, trying to understand where we drifted. It wasn't drifting. She had walked away a long time ago. But instead of ending things like an adult, she kept me in the wings, like a backup plan, a safety net in case the new life didn't work out. I didn't even cry that time. I think I was past tears. All I felt was this deep, sharp clarity, a kind of emotional silence that was louder than any fight we could have had. She didn't just break my trust. She erased me from a version of her life she actually cared about. And once I saw that, I knew there was no fixing this. There's a point where keeping everything to yourself starts to feel like protecting the person who hurt you. I didn't realize how much weight I'd been carrying around until I finally started telling people what happened. The first person I told was my best friend, Mike. We've been close since college, the kind of friendship where nothing's really off limits. But even with him, I'd held back. I think I was embarrassed. Not just because I got cheated on, but because I didn't see it. Because I let it go on for so long. Because part of me still felt responsible. But when I finally told him all of it, from the messages to the fake film project to the pictures of her and Eli, he didn't judge me. He just listened. He looked more angry than I felt, honestly. And hearing someone else say, "Man, that's messed up," out loud, it helped more than I expected. From there, it got easier. I told my brother, my mom, a couple mutual friends, the ones I trusted. I didn't go around trying to ruin her name or start drama, but I stopped covering for her. I stopped pretending we were just going through a rough patch. People were shocked. Most of them had no idea. She was always so charming, so put together, always posting pictures of us on social media like we were the dream couple. But now that the truth was out, a few friends admitted they had seen little signs, moments where she seemed off, flirty with other people, distracted when I wasn't around. That stung a little. Like maybe people did know something was off, but no one wanted to be the one to say it. I also realized how much of myself I'd lost over the past year. I started doing things I hadn't done in a long time, going to the gym again, reading for fun, reconnecting with hobbies. I dropped when everything at home got heavy. It felt strange at first, like I was trying to remember who I was before I got so wrapped up in being her husband. We were still technically living in the same house, though barely talking. I was sleeping on the couch. She kept to the bedroom. The air between us was thin, not cold exactly, just empty, like there was nothing left to fight over. She never apologized, never tried to explain anything beyond that first night. She just slipped back into silence and kept living like the life she'd built behind my back wasn't crashing down. A few days later, I told her I was filing for divorce. She didn't even look surprised. No pleading, no begging, no questions. Just a tired little nod, like she'd been waiting for it. That moment was weirdly calm. I thought it would feel explosive, but instead, it felt like closing a book I'd already finished reading months ago, one that should have ended a few chapters earlier, but I kept hoping would change. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. And the strange thing? That was the first time in a long time I felt in control. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was deciding. The silence wasn't hers to manage anymore. I was done protecting the illusion. I was finally starting to speak up for myself, for the truth, and for the version of me that deserved better all along. Filing for divorce wasn't as dramatic as I thought it would be. No slam doors, no shouting matches, no last-minute pleas to stay. Just paperwork. A lot of it. Cold, emotionless lines on paper that somehow summed up 7 years of shared life. I met with a lawyer, a friend of a friend who came highly recommended. He was professional, calm, and didn't push. He let me talk when I needed to, and when I was done explaining the whole mess, he just nodded and said, "Let's make sure you come out of this standing." That stuck with me. The process itself was weirdly fast, mostly because we had no kids and the house was in my name. She didn't fight it. No arguments over assets. No back and forth about who gets what. She barely looked at the papers. Just signed where she needed to and slid them back across the table, like it was a lease ending, not a marriage. That kind of indifference should have made me feel victorious, like I was finally taking back control. But honestly, it hurt more than I expected. Watching her treat the end of our relationship like a canceled subscription reminded me just how far gone she already was. I'd been holding on. She had already let go. After everything, part of me still hoped for something. Not to fix it, but maybe to understand it. An apology, a breakdown, a moment of realness. But it never came. She wore her calm like armor, and maybe that was her way of coping. Or maybe it was just who she really was underneath the roles she'd always played. I moved out fully a week after filing, packed what I needed, and left everything else. I didn't even say goodbye. She wasn't home when I left, and I didn't wait. Just closed the door, locked it behind me, and stepped into a future that felt equal parts terrifying and freeing. The first night of my new place, a small apartment with barely enough furniture, I sat on the floor eating takeout straight from a bag. It should have felt depressing. But honestly, it felt like breathing fresh air after months of holding it in. It was quiet. It was mine. There was no pretending. No tension hanging in the air. Just me, starting over. I expected to feel lost. And yeah, there were moments where the silence got heavy, where I caught myself still thinking, I should text her about this, before remembering I didn't need to anymore. But those moments started fading, slowly. One night, a few weeks in, I got a message from someone I didn't expect, a mutual friend of ours who had always been closer to her. She said she'd heard about what happened and wanted to check in. I figured it would be awkward, but then she told me something I wasn't ready for. I'm really sorry. A lot of us had no idea, but a few of us, we suspected things. She was different around him. I asked why no one said anything. She said, because we thought you knew, or maybe did not know. That hit hard. Turns out I'd been the last one to see the cracks. Maybe I was too trusting. Or maybe I believed so much in the version of us I had in my head that I didn't want to let go. But now I was seeing it all clearly. And even if that truth came with pain, it also came with power. I wasn't broken. I was finally unburdened. It's funny how life has this quiet way of nudging you forward, even when you're not ready. I wasn't out looking to meet anyone. I wasn't on dating apps. I wasn't trying to move on. And I definitely wasn't in the headspace for anything serious. But sometimes the smallest interactions hit in a way that cracks something open. There's this little coffee shop near my new place. Nothing fancy, but quiet, with good light and terrible parking. I'd started going there in the mornings before work, mostly for routine. Something stable. Familiar faces behind the counter. The same old songs playing over the speakers. It gave me a sense of rhythm I'd been missing. One morning, I was sitting by the window, halfway through a stale muffin, and answering emails when someone asked if they could share the table. Place was packed. I looked up and saw a woman about my age, book in one hand, iced coffee in the other. Friendly smile. Nothing forced. I nodded, told her to go for it. We didn't really talk at first. Just kind of coexisted in that easy way where no one's trying to impress anyone. She read. I typed. But eventually, she asked me about the book I had with me, some nonfiction thing I'd barely started. And just like that, we were in a conversation. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't heavy. It was normal, like talking to someone who didn't know anything about my past, didn't have any expectations, wasn't part of the wreckage I just crawled out of. Her name was Claire. She was a graphic designer who worked remotely, just in town for a few weeks helping her sister with something. We talk about movies, travel, how weird adult friendships can be. She had this calm energy, not shy, just peaceful, the kind of person who doesn't fill silence with noise. I didn't realize how much I missed that until then. We ended up sharing that table 2 more times that week, totally by coincidence. It became a bit of an unspoken thing. No pressure, no plans, just a familiar face in a time where everything else felt new and shaky. I didn't tell her about what happened with Lisa. Not at first. I wasn't ready to make that part of my identity. But for the first time since it all fell apart, I caught myself smiling in a way that felt real. Not forced, not performative. Just real. One night, after the 3rd coffee table hangout, I went home and looked at myself in the mirror. I actually looked better. Not happier necessarily, but lighter. Like some of that weight had finally started to lift. It made me realize that healing doesn't show up as one big moment. It's not a movie scene with swelling music. It's 100 little moments where you slowly stop hurting, where you laugh without guilt, where someone calls you by your name and doesn't attach it to all the things you've been through. Meeting Claire didn't magically fix everything. That's not how it works. But it reminded me of something I hadn't felt in a long time. That version of me who was kind, open, curious, still existed. He didn't disappear when she lied or when the marriage fell apart. He'd just been buried for a while under the noise and pain and silence. And now he was coming back. I always imagined our final conversation would be some kind of dramatic emotional reckoning, that she'd cry, that I'd shout, that we'd unload everything we kept bottled up and finally lay it all bare. But when it actually happened, it was quieter than I expected, way quieter. She messaged me out of nowhere. Just a simple, "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at it for a while. My first instinct was to ignore it. But something told me this was probably the last time we'd ever speak. And whether I needed it or not, part of me wanted to hear her out. If only confirm what I already knew. We met at a park, public place, neutral. I got there early, sat on a bench under this big, shady tree, and just watched the world go by for a bit. Families walking dogs, kids riding bikes. That normal stuff that somehow felt louder now. She arrived a few minutes late, dressed like she always did, carefully casual. She gave me a little smile, like we were old friends meeting for coffee. I didn't smile back. We sat. There was a long pause before she spoke. She started with small talk, which I didn't entertain. I think she realized pretty fast that this wasn't going to be a soft landing. She said she was sorry. Not the fake kind, not overly dramatic, just quiet, but not for everything, just for how it ended. Not for cheating, not for lying, not for the double life, just for the ending. And that, to me, said it all. She still didn't see it. Or maybe she did and just couldn't admit it. She talked about how things got complicated, how we grew apart, and how she wasn't proud of how she handled things. She said she didn't want me to hate her. That last part really got to me. Not because I do hate her, I don't, but because even in that moment, she was still thinking about how she felt. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she acknowledge the betrayal beyond surface-level regret. I let her talk. I listened. And when she was done, I said this. You didn't just break my heart. You rewrote my life without telling me. And I kept showing up, thinking we were writing it together. She didn't say anything to that. Just looked down at her hands. I stood up, told her I hoped she found what she was looking for, and that I didn't need anything else from her. No more messages. No more updates. The book was closed. And I meant it. Walking away from that bench, I didn't feel victorious or angry or sad. I just felt clear, like I had finally stepped out of the shadow I'd been living in. There was no more guessing, no more hoping. Just truth, heavy but freeing. That was the real end. Not the papers, not the moving out, that conversation. And when I got back to my apartment that night, I took a deep breath, opened the windows, and just let the air in. Clean, quiet air. No lies in it. No roles being played. Just life. Simple, honest, mine. After that last conversation with Lisa, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. Just a slow, steady unwinding of all the weight I'd been carrying. For the first time in what felt like forever, I stopped bracing for the next blow. There were no more secrets to uncover. No more texts to find. No more wondering if I was missing something. The chapter had closed, and every day after that became a new blank page. Not a clean one, because let's be real, the ink from the past doesn't just disappear. But it was mine now. I wasn't living in someone else's script anymore. I started getting into routines again. Simple stuff. Morning walks with coffee. Grocery shopping without aimlessly wandering the aisles. Cooking my own meals badly at first, but it felt good to mess up a recipe and not feel judged. I even bought a plant, which weirdly felt like commitment. Like, yeah, okay, let's see if I can keep something alive again. I wasn't healed. I don't even know what that means, honestly, but I was functioning. And slowly, I started to enjoy things again without that lingering pit in my stomach. I started going to gym again, not for revenge or some glow-up story, just because I realized how much I neglected myself. I was showing up for me now, not for approval, not for anyone else. And the more I did it, the stronger I felt, not just physically, but mentally. Like I was building trust with myself again. My friends noticed a change. A couple of them pulled me aside and said, "You look lighter." And they weren't wrong. I was still dealing with stuff. Sure. But I wasn't drowning in it anymore. I wasn't performing grief. I was processing it in real time at my own pace. And Claire? Yeah, she was still around. We hadn't labeled anything. And honestly, that was kind of perfect. We'd meet for coffee a couple times a week, walk around the park, talk about life, books, whatever. She never pushed, never asked too much. She just showed up, and that meant more to me than I think she knew. One afternoon, we sat by the lake and talked about starting over. Not in a dramatic way, but just how weird it feels to have the chance to build something new after you've watched your old life fall apart. She said, "It's not about getting back to who you were. It's about deciding who you want to be next." That stuck with me, because for so long, I kept trying to find the old version of me, the guy before the lies, before the heartbreak. But maybe that guy's not coming back. Maybe he's not supposed to. Maybe I'm supposed to become someone better because of what I went through. And maybe that's okay. Now, when I wake up, the first thing I feel isn't panic. It's calm. Not happiness. Not yet, but peace. And that's something I never thought I'd get back. Life isn't back to normal. It's something different now. But it's real. It's honest. And most importantly, it's mine. I was starting to feel like I'd finally put it all behind me, or at least packed it away neatly enough that it didn't rattle every time I took a breath. And then I saw her. It was a random Thursday evening. I'd gone to a bookstore downtown, one of those quiet, cozy ones with creaky floors and handwritten staff picks. I'd been picking up a few new reads, something light for once, when I turned a corner and there she was, Lisa. She was standing by the memoir section, flipping through a book, totally unaware I was 10 feet away. And for a second, I froze, not out of fear, not even anger, just surprise. She looked the same. Same careful outfit, same posture, like she was performing calm. But something about her felt smaller, not physically, just the way she carried herself. Like the spotlight she used to bask and was gone, and she wasn't sure how to stand without it. She didn't see me. Or if she did, she didn't show it. I watched her for a moment longer than I probably should have, and then I turned and walked out. No confrontation. No dramatic ending. Just a silence. The kind I used to hate, but now felt peaceful. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. I took a breath and realized something important. Seeing her didn't hurt. Not really. It didn't open a wound or pull me back into that dark place. If anything, it felt like closing a book I'd forgotten I even started. I'd spent so much time imagining what I'd do if I saw her again, what I'd say, how I'd react, whether it would undo all the progress I'd made. But it didn't. It just confirmed that I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not closure, not answers, not even acknowledgement. The version of me that needed those things, he was gone. And I liked the guy who had taken his place. Later that night, I told Claire about it. She didn't flinch, didn't offer fake sympathy or try to guide the moment. She just nodded and said, "That's big." And yeah, it was, because healing isn't loud. It's not always some grand turning point or movie scene moment. Sometimes it's as quiet as walking past the person who broke your heart and realize that your heart doesn't belong to them anymore. It belongs to you now. They say time heals everything, but I don't think that's exactly true. I think honesty does. Honesty with yourself, with the pain, with the facts. Time just gives you the space to face it. That's what this last stretch has been. Not some magical transformation, but a gradual, honest rebuilding. And lately, I've realized something I never thought I'd feel again. I'm okay. Not just surviving. Not just getting through the day. Actually okay. My apartment still isn't fully decorated. I've still got furniture that doesn't match. And I use a stack of books as a nightstand. But it's mine. I walk in the door and don't brace for tension. I wake up and don't feel like I'm forgetting something. I go to bed without my chest feeling heavy. I build a life around small joys, weekend hikes, spontaneous movie nights, dinners that don't revolve around silence. I'm not rushing toward anything, not chasing a relationship, not trying to replace what I lost. I'm just showing up for myself, every day, one choice at a time. Claire and I still talk. We've grown closer, slowly. We're not putting labels on anything. We don't need to. She's become someone I trust, not because she said the right things, but because she never pretended to be someone she's not. That honesty is something I didn't realize I was starving for. Sometimes I catch myself smiling at things I used to overlook. A good song on the radio, a stranger holding the door open, a stretch of sunlight across my floor. Little things I never had the mental space to appreciate when I was so wrapped up in holding together a relationship that was falling apart behind my back. I've also started forgiving myself, and that might be the biggest part, for missing the signs, for staying too long, for loving someone who didn't love me the same way back. It wasn't weakness. It was hope, and I'll never feel ashamed of having hope. If anything, I'm proud of that version of me, the guy who kept trying, even when he was in the dark, because he's the reason I made it through. And Lisa, I don't think about her much anymore, not in a bitter way, just in a distant, that chapter's over kind of way. I don't hate her. I don't wish her anything bad. I just don't wish anything. That part of my life is over, and I'm okay with that. Some wounds don't leave scars. They leave wisdom. And the biggest thing I've learned, you can't heal in the place you were hurt, but you can grow somewhere new. And I have. There weren't many loose ends left, but the ones that lingered still carried weight. There was a storage unit we'd shared, mostly full of stuff that didn't matter anymore. Old decor, boxes of holiday lights, a coffee table we never used. I kept putting it off, telling myself it wasn't urgent. But deep down, I knew what it really was. The final anchor, the last physical reminder that we once had a we. So one Saturday, I drove over. No playlist, no distractions. Just me and the key. I expected it to feel heavy, nostalgic, maybe even emotional. But when I opened the door and saw it, dusty, cluttered, forgotten, I felt nothing. It looked more like a garage sale from someone else's life than something I used to call mine. I took what little belonged to me, a few old books, a set of tools, my college hoodie, somehow still in decent shape. Everything else? I left it, not out of spite. I just didn't need it anymore. I sent her one last message. Storage units cleared on my end. You can take care of the rest. She replied with a simple got it. Thanks. That was the last time we spoke. No anger, no sentiment. Just two people who used to be something, now quietly unlinked. I deleted her number after that, not in a dramatic way, no emotion behind it, just a necessary step. There was no reason to keep pieces of a past I'd already let go of. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat on my balcony with a drink, no phone, no music, no distractions. Just the sound of the city at night, and the quiet hum of peace. I thought about everything I'd been through, not in a sad way. More like watching a movie you've seen 100 times, and finally turning it off before the credits roll. I didn't need to rewatch the ending anymore. I knew how it went. I also started journaling again. I hadn't done that in forever, but it felt right, not to relive things, but to remember who I am now, to capture the person who rose from all of it, the version of me that didn't settle, that didn't break, that learned to breathe again. And I wrote something at the bottom of that first page. Closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from no longer needing them. It felt true, and it felt final. I had faced the silence, the betrayal, the wreckage. I had dug through the mess and pulled myself out. Not quickly, not neatly, but fully. And I had something now that I didn't have back then, clarity. I knew what I would never accept again. I knew what love should really feel like. I knew that protecting your peace is worth walking away from anything that threatens it. And more than anything, I knew this. That story, the one filled with lies and half-truths and masks, it's over. The next one, it's mine to write. If you told me a year ago I'd be living alone, divorced, and completely rebuilding my life from scratch, I wouldn't have believed you. Back then, I was still fighting for a version of reality that didn't exist. I was trying to hold together something that had already slipped through my fingers. I thought if I worked harder, stayed patient, gave more, she'd come back to me. But what I've learned is this. You can't fix something by yourself that was broken by someone else's choices. There's a different kind of grief that comes with being betrayed. It's not just about losing a person. It's about losing the version of them you thought was real. the version they let you believe in, the one they used to keep you around while they lived a life you were never invited into. But here's the thing, that grief doesn't last forever. Eventually you stop asking why. You stop replaying every moment. You stop thinking of yourself as a person who got left or lied to. Instead, you start seeing yourself as a person who walked away, the one who had enough self-respect to stop holding the door open for someone who had already walked through it. If you're listening to this and you're in that place, confused, doubting yourself, feeling like maybe you were the problem, I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me. You're not crazy. You're not weak. And you're not unlovable just because someone failed to love you the right way. People lie. People cheat. People live double lives not because of who you are, but because of who they are. You didn't make them do it. You just happened to be close enough to feel the fallout. What matters now is how you rise, how you rebuild, how you decide that your story doesn't end in betrayal. That's just a chapter. The plot twist, not the final scene. Now, my life isn't perfect. It's quieter. It's simpler. But it's real. I don't have to guess where I stand with the people around me. I don't have to tiptoe around tension. I wake up with peace, not panic. And every day, I get to write the kind of story I actually want to live in. So here's what I've learned after everything. Don't stay where love feels like performance. Don't accept half-truths because the whole truth scares you. And most of all, don't let someone's betrayal convince you to abandon yourself. You deserve honesty. You deserve safety. You deserve you. And that's what I finally gave myself. Thanks for listening.